My parents begged me not to wear my uniform to my brother's wedding. They told me the military was embarrassing, but I walked in wearing my dress blues, a silver star on my chest. 150 guests went silent. 12 veterans stood up and saluted. Silver star in the room. One of them shouted. Then the billionaire father of the bride walked over, and my family's house of cards completely collapsed. 2 hours before that moment, my spine slammed hard against the glass door of a bridal suite in Charleston, South Carolina. Take off those ridiculous medals. My mother shoved a cheap black garment bag directly into my chest. The heavy brass buttons on my military jacket scraped loudly against the glass. She leaned in close. Her expensive perfume was thick enough to choke on. It was that suffocating floral scent she always wore when she was trying to project an image of old money, an image we absolutely did not have. "You are not ruining this for us," she hissed, her voice shaking with absolute disgust. "You look like a low-class grunt. Look at your skin. Look at those hideous scars on your neck. You look like a beggar. If you walk out there looking like that, you are going to humiliate this entire family in front of the in-laws. Put on this catering uniform or get out." I gripped the crumpled black shirt. The cheap polyester scratched my palms. I locked my jaw, forcing a slow, measured breath through my teeth. She wanted me to shrink into the shadows to protect her pristine image. I tightened my grip on the fabric, staring right into her frantic, cold eyes. She was looking at my neck, at the jagged white line of scar tissue running collarbone to jaw. She called it hideous. She did not care that the scar came from a piece of shrapnel I took in a medical tent while shielding a wounded 19-year-old engineer. She did not care about the blood, the sand, or the suffocating heat of that deployment. To her, it was just an ugly blemish that clashed with the pastel color palette of a high society wedding. She was entirely consumed by the aesthetic of wealth. Before my mother could say another word, the heavy oak door of the suite swung open. Stephen stormed in, frantically adjusting the cuffs of his $5,000 tuxedo. My 28-year-old brother stopped dead in his tracks. He looked me up and down like I was a piece of rotting garbage that had just blown in from the street. "Are you seriously still wearing that?" he snapped, his voice cracking with panic. He snatched the black catering shirt from my mother's hands and shoved it violently against my chest. "Put it on, Bernice. I am not asking you." He paced the room, running a manicured hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I spent 3 years building my reputation with Luke and Lewis. Do you have any idea who that man is? He is a billionaire. He owns half the real estate in this city. I told him our family consists of elite, high society corporate investors. If he sees his new son-in-law has a 32-year-old combat medic sister who looks like she just crawled out of a desert trench, my entire life is over." Stephen stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "You are going to put on this black shirt. You are going to stand in the dark corners of the ballroom, and you are going to serve drinks. You do not speak to anyone. You do not introduce yourself. You stay invisible." I slowly turned my head. 4 of my aunts and uncles were sitting right there on the plush velvet sofas in the corner. They heard every single cruel, venomous word. My aunt picked up a crystal champagne flute, suddenly absolutely fascinated by the bubbles. My uncle checked his pristine gold watch, deliberately turning his face toward the wall. Complete, suffocating cowardice. "Just do what he says, Bernice," my aunt muttered to the floor. "Do not ruin a $100 million wedding just because you want a little attention." My jaw locked tight. They thought my silence meant I was breaking. They thought I was still the obedient scapegoat who would swallow their abuse to keep the peace. They did not know a combat medic learns exactly where to apply pressure to stop a bleeding heart, and exactly how to crush a parasite. When I was 12 years old, my mother locked me in the laundry room during Stephen's 10th birthday party because I had a black eye from falling off my bike, and she did not want the neighborhood mothers asking questions that might ruin the festive mood. They broke me then. But today, standing in this sterile, overpriced bridal suite, I was the one holding the hammer. These people were not my family. They were a collection of insecure cowards, desperately clinging to a golden child who was feeding them a fragile fantasy. I looked down at the cheap waiter uniform in my hands. The black polyester felt grimy against my skin. Then I looked at my mother. Her chest was heaving under her silk dress, her eyes silently begging me to just disappear and save her the embarrassment. I looked at Stephen, his face red and slick with entitled sweat. I let the silence stretch out in the room. I let the tension wrap around their throats for just a few seconds. Then, I smiled. A slow, chillingly calm smile. "All right," I said. My voice was completely steady, barely above a whisper. "I will stand exactly where I belong." My mother let out a massive, dramatic sigh of relief. She smoothed down the front of her expensive gown, the crisis averted in her mind. Stephen smirked, turning to admire his reflection in the vanity mirror. He actually had the nerve to clap me on the shoulder. "Good girl," he muttered, completely oblivious to the ice in my veins. "Grab a tray of champagne on your way out to the floor." They turned their backs on me. They walked out of the suite, laughing together, heading down the hall to greet their wealthy guests. They completely dropped their guard. They thought they had successfully buried my identity. They had absolutely no idea I was the one holding the shovel. The heavy oak door clicked shut, trapping the scent of my mother's expensive perfume inside the room. I looked down at the black waiter shirt in my hands. I walked over to the corner wastebasket and let it drop. I stood in front of the full-length mirror. I brushed a speck of dust from the dark navy wool of my dress blues. I adjusted my collar. I reached up and ran my thumb over the cold, sharp edges of the silver star pinned above my left breast pocket. They wanted me to hide this. They wanted to bury my blood, my sacrifice, and the memory of the soldiers I could not save, just to make sure my brother could marry a trust fund. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Stephen thought he was a mastermind. He thought playing a high society investor was just a matter of wearing the right watch and renting the right car. He forgot I spent years analyzing battlefield logistics. Finding his secrets took almost no effort at all. I opened the digital dossier. $500,000. The exact amount Stephen owed underground sportsbooks. He was drowning in debt. I had the ledger, the loan shark's threats, and the property records proving my mother mortgaged her home to the brink of foreclosure to cover his defaults. They were entirely broke, banking on Rosie's family fortune to bail them out. I attached the file in a message to Luke and Lewis, a wedding gift regarding your new son-in-law's true net worth. I hit send and pocketed my phone. My pulse was completely steady. I walked down the corridor toward the ballroom, rounding the final corner. Stephen stood outside the double doors, laughing with a group of men. Then, he saw my uniform. The color vanished from his face. His glass slipped and shattered across the marble. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he choked out. He lunged at me, his fingers wrapping around my wrist like a vice. "Are you insane?" he hissed. "I told you to put on the uniform." He shoved me against the wall, snapping his fingers frantically at the two security guards near the entrance. "Hey!" he barked in sheer panic. "Remove this woman. She's a delusional ex-employee trying to crash. Get her out the back door. Now." The guards marched toward us. One reached for my jacket lapel. Stephen flashed a sick, triumphant smirk. He thought he could just throw me out. My boots stayed planted. Before the guard could touch me, the ballroom doors clicked and swung wide open. I ripped my wrist from Stephen's grip and stepped directly into the entrance. An older man at the nearest table froze, his eyes locked dead onto my chest. He pushed his chair back, standing with a stiff, unyielding posture. Silver Star recipient in the room, he barked, his voice cutting the music like a whip. 11 other men immediately stood up, their spines straightened. One by one, 12 veterans snapped a razor-sharp salute. The entire ballroom went dead silent. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Stephen stood paralyzed beside me, chest heaving. A bead of sweat rolled down his pale temple. The security guards who were about to grab my jacket took 3 steps back in shock. The crowd parted as Luke and Lewis walked straight toward us, his jaw set in granite, phone tight in his hand. Stephen let out a pathetic, high-pitched laugh, wiping his slick forehead. "Mr. Lewis," Stephen stammered, "I am so sorry about this disturbance. This woman is completely out of her mind. Security is handling it." Lucan ignored him entirely. He walked past Stephen, stopping directly in front of me. He looked at my medals and reached out a steady hand. "Captain Edwards," Lucan said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "It is a profound honor to have the true hero under this roof." I shook his hand, keeping my spine straight. "The honor is mine, sir." Lucan faced the stunned crowd. He gestured toward the stage, and the master of ceremonies practically threw the microphone into his waiting hand. "Before we celebrate this union," Lucan announced, his voice vibrating through the speakers, "I need to address a slight misunderstanding regarding my new son-in-law." Stephen stopped breathing, his hands shaking violently. Across the room, my mother rose halfway out of her chair, her face turning a sickly ashen gray in absolute horror. "Stephen told me his family comes from a long line of elite corporate investors," Lucan continued, holding up his phone. "I just received a verified financial dossier. It seems Stephen is hiding a $500,000 debt to underground sportsbooks." A collective gasp ripped through the guests. Lucan turned his piercing gaze toward my mother's table. And Fallon Edwards, his mother, secretly mortgaged her home to the brink of foreclosure to cover his early defaults. They are entirely broke. They plan to use my daughter's wedding money to pay off loan sharks. Stephen dropped to his knees. He buried his face in his hands, sobbing and begging for a chance to explain. Lucan stared down at him with pure disgust. "The most repulsive part of this charade," Lucan said, his voice dropping to a lethal register, "is that they tried to force a decorated war hero to wear a black waiter uniform tonight. They wanted to hide her to protect a pathetic lie. That ends right now." Rosie stepped out from the head table, her face flushed with disgust. She walked over to where Stephen knelt, raised her bridal bouquet, and threw it violently into his chest. White rose petals shattered across the marble as she turned and walked out the side doors without looking back. "Get this fraud out of my sight," Lucan ordered. The 2 massive guards grabbed Stephen by the armpits. They hauled him off the floor and dragged him kicking and screaming out the front doors. I looked across the room at my mother. Fallon had collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands. The relatives who had nodded along in the bridal suite now turned their backs, scooting their chairs away. She was entirely isolated. Lucan walked back over to me. He pulled a checkbook from his jacket, wrote rapidly, and handed it to me. $100,000, made out to the veterans' charity of your choice. Lucan said quietly, "You wear that uniform with pride, Captain." I took the check and nodded once. The room remained silent as Lucan walked away. The empire of lies was burned to ash, and I was the only one left standing. The ballroom slowly emptied out. The only sound left was the catering staff sweeping shattered rose petals. Fallon stepped out from the shadows. Her flawless makeup was ruined, dark mascara staining her cheeks. She reached out and grabbed both of my hands, her fingers trembling wildly. "Please forgive me," she sobbed with raw desperation. "I lost my mind to high society. I was terrified of losing everything. You are my daughter, and I love you. I looked down at her shaking hands. The tight knot in my chest loosened. I nodded once, accepting the olive branch. I walked out to the parking lot and tossed my jacket onto the passenger seat. Completely exhausted. The next morning, I reached into the breast pocket of my dress blues to retrieve the donation. Empty. I tore through the car compartments. Nothing. The check was gone. The fake tears suddenly made perfect, sickening sense. Fallon orchestrated that weeping apology to get close enough to pick my pocket. She stole a charity donation to pay off her Golden Boys loan sharks. She weaponized my vulnerability to commit a felony. I pulled my phone out, bypassing the police and the bank fraud paperwork. I opened my text thread with Lucan. My mother intercepted the check to pay Stephen's debts. Cancel it immediately. 3 seconds later, Lucan replied with a single check mark. The check bounced before Fallon could forge my signature, triggering the final avalanche. The loan sharks descended on Stephen by noon. The bank slapped a foreclosure notice on Fallon's front door before sunset. They burned their own glass house down to the foundation. I blocked both their numbers forever, shifted into drive, and merged onto the highway. The collapse of their fake empire was a spectacular, public demolition. The bounced check triggered an immediate audit by Lucan's legal team, who turned Stephen's financial records over to authorities. Stephen was forced into bankruptcy. The loan sharks ignored the court entirely, repossessing his sports car from the country club parking lot in broad daylight. Fallon faced her own legal nightmare for attempting to forge my endorsement. The judge sentenced her to 4 years of probation and ordered a $62,000 restitution to the banks she defrauded. But the social execution hit harder. The Historical Society revoked her board seat. Her neighbors stopped waving. She was completely blacklisted from the high society she destroyed her own daughter to impress. 6 months passed. I walked out to my mailbox and found a thick envelope. The return address was a cramped apartment complex on the wrong side of Charleston. The handwriting was frantic. Fallon. 3 pages of tightly scrawled cursive spilled out, filled with desperate guilt trips. She claimed her health was failing, insisting I owed her a conversation. She wrote that family must forgive, and that she only stole the check to protect her child. She was still weaponizing motherhood to excuse a felony. I read the final sentence. My heart rate perfectly flat. I walked back into my kitchen, held the pages over the shredder, and let go. The steel blades ground her manipulation into meaningless ribbons. The silence in my kitchen felt absolute, and it was beautiful. I walked out to my back patio, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow across the deck of my new home. 3 of my former squad mates sat around the table, laughing over a deck of cards. Mark handed me a cold drink. Sarah pulled out a chair for me. This is my chosen family. We share 0 genetics, but we share what actually matters. Loyalty, accountability, unwavering respect. When I sit at this table, no one demands I hide my scars or lower my voice to make themselves feel larger. We celebrate each other as we are. The heavy anxiety I carried for 32 years is gone. The war with my own blood is finally over. Some people are so poor. All they have is their image. Think about that. Toxic family systems operate like a failing corporation, surviving on fraudulent public relations and forced compliance. My mother and brother didn't harbor personal hatred for me. They hated reality. They hated that my authentic life threatened their fragile illusion. The waiter's uniform was a psychological muzzle designed to erase my identity. Because my existence as a successful adult shattered their lies, people who live entirely for their public image view other human beings as props. If you elevate their status, they put you on display. If you threaten their curated lie, they shove you into a dark closet and demand you stay quiet. They don't care how much the darkness hurts you. as long as the spotlight stays on them. When dealing with narcissists, you must understand how they use emotion as a tactical weapon. Think about my mother crying in the ballroom. Her tears were real, but her remorse was fake. She cried because she was backed into a corner and needed a resource. Chronic manipulators view your empathy as a vault, and their fake apologies are the lockpicks they use to drain it. They know which buttons to push because they installed them. You can never negotiate with someone who operates in bad faith or explain decency to someone who sees kindness as a weakness. If you give them an inch of forgiveness, they use it to map out their next attack. They use your desire for a healthy family as a leash to drag you back into their dysfunction. If you take anything away from my story, remember these 3 rules. Rule number 1. Blood fails to make you family. Respect creates the bond. Genetics hold no authority over who gets a seat at your table. Society conditions us to believe we owe our families unending loyalty, but that is a lie to keep victims trapped. If a gathering requires you to hide your scars just to get a plate of food, you belong somewhere else. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share a last name. Rule number 2. Reject hollow apologies from chronic manipulators. Real apologies come with changed behavior. Fake apologies arrive with an immediate request. Their tears are just an invoice for the next time they plan to use you. When an abuser suddenly shows up crying, look past the performance. Ask yourself what they stand to gain. Let them cry. Keep your wallet closed and your door locked. Rule number 3. The best revenge is a mirror. You have no obligation to plot the destruction of toxic people. Engaging with them only feeds their need for conflict. Just expose their actions to reality and step back. Let the crushing weight of their own lies break their foundation. When you stop protecting their secrets, their world collapses. It takes incredible strength to stop playing your assigned role in a toxic family. The moment you step off the stage, they will call you the villain. Let them talk. Their distorted narrative is no longer your problem. Your only job is to build a life so full of authentic joy that their toxic whispers can no longer reach you. Have you ever had to shrink yourself to keep the peace at a family gathering? At what point did you realize the cost was too high? And what did you do to break free? Tell me your story in the comments below. We read them, and we see you. Share this with someone who is still fighting to wear their own medals in the dark. Remind them their scars are proof of survival, not a source of shame. You are not broken because you survived a war zone you didn't start. You are a survivor. Keep fighting for the peace you absolutely deserve. I am Bernice Edwards, and I am finally free.